was called Montage of Conspiracy, presented by Mr. Tom Wilson. Wilson worked extensively in computer imaging of his findings.
Local boys who have done well.
Yeah, we paid, they did.
Is there anybody from the SXSW or ASK group that could ask them next door, please? It's that the CIA is having their There's bastards who stop at nothing, you know.
Unfortunately, Doctor, that is a live band next door. We had no notice that they were going to do this, so y'all are going to have to speak out loud. Y'all are going to have to listen.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Hey, we can scream louder.
I have been asked to introduce the next presenter because not only is he from Pittsburgh, but we have been kind of working together, although the presentation is entirely his. I have had the pleasure of working with him and trying to help him obtain materials for him to analyze. A brief, interesting history. Tom and I met just 2.5 years ago. He called me up, introduced himself, and came down and talked, and told me his interest in JFK and the work that he does. He had just captured a picture from television and had gone to work on that picture, and soon you'll see what I mean by going to work on it. And that began a friendship. Tom Wilson spent 30 years with U.S. Steel. He was a project manager, a construction engineer, and he was chief electrical engineer. Got an excellent background with top credentials. Today he works as a private consultant for various industries, doing all kinds of fascinating things. Tom is somebody who I've come to like very much. He's a man of honesty and integrity that comes through immediately. You'll hear his presentation. It is fascinating. It is extremely complex and very technical, and so you'll have to pay close attention, and you will be fascinated, and I shall be most interested to hear the comments and discussions that flow hereafter. I just want to make this additional observation of a personal nature. There are two ways in which I have come to believe very much in what Tom has revealed through his various analytical studies. One is that things he has done, conclusions he has arrived at, of a physical nature, actual findings, have in many instances corroborated, been completely consistent with the conclusions that others had arrived at previously that Tom had no awareness of, and which they had arrived at in their own technical analytical studies. And that includes some of the work done by the gentlemen here this evening, and that's why they're on the panel, and they'll tell you more about that. I have used Tom myself in two interesting cases. One, a homicide case, a murder trial in Hawaii. Another one, a very fascinating products liability automobile accident case in northern Michigan. And so I have knowledge of how that work can be utilized, and moreover, I have knowledge of the work that Tom did. In this case in Hawaii, where a stepfather was accused of the murder of his 6-year-old stepson, my analysis showed me that I was completely false. And Tom's work on a video that had been made showing the boy allegedly having been bruised indicated that the bruises were artifactual on the film and not at all real. And together, that resulted in a very satisfactory outcome for the falsely accused defendant. In the northern Michigan case, very interesting, a man is driving an automobile. He's a passenger. He had fallen asleep after picking up his elderly father from a nursing home, and his cousin was driving the car. A drunk driver came across the center lane in the opposite direction, crashed into them, and killed the owner of the car, who at that time was a front seat passenger. The hood of the car sprung loose at the base of the windshield, something which is not supposed to happen according to federal regulations. And the attorney who was representing the decedent's estate felt that that hood had come through the windshield and had caused a serious injury to his head. No autopsy had been done. The local coroner in northern Michigan just signed the case up. Now this became critical to determine whether or not that head wound resulted in serious injury, or was it just a superficial laceration? Well, Tom analyzed the photos that we got, and he came to the conclusion that there was penetration into the skull, there were fractures, and there was hemorrhage. Well, a couple of months later, we dug that body up, and I did this excavation autopsy, and there were skull fractures, and there was a hemorrhage inside. He'll tell you and he'll show you how he sees those things which the human eye cannot see. This is image processing by computer analysis. It is not any kind of enhancement. More than that, I do not know and cannot tell you, although Tom has explained it to me many times, but you have to have it explained many times. And you will now be fascinated, I'm sure, by his presentation. Tom Wilson.
Thank you very much. If I'm not talking loud enough, just yell. I have these two gentlemen up here as an interface because if I start getting off on the deep end, you're all going to go to sleep, and we need these guys to help me, okay? One thing I would like to say is I'm from the steel industry, and the last time I made a presentation like this, it was in a metals paper, a reading of metals papers, and it was full of metallurgists, researchers, and people that have written papers on things like the transformation of something or other of 100-degree parts of steel and all this sort of thing. And there were about 20 presenters, and I was the last presenter. And my presentation was how remote control controls the locomotive in the steel mill and nobody gets killed. So I sat here, I was the last presenter, and at that time you're allowed to smoke in these assemblies, and I noticed after a while that there was some pattern recognition that everybody smoking a pipe, whenever they had a formula, the pipe would start to send little smoke signals up. So the frequency of the pipe meant that they really liked what you had. But I did not have a formula, being in the remote control business. Now, in a steel mill, when you're remote controlling a locomotive or a crane or something, you wear a belt box over here around your waist, and you control this particular item. Now, there's a safety device, a mercury switch in there, that if for some reason the fellow would trip and fall or have a heart attack or whatever, the mercury switch shuts everything off and the thing doesn't go crazy. So I said to the fellow that was presenting the paper with me, you know, we're not going to make it unless we have a formula. So when it came time for my part of the presentation, I talked about it, and a question was asked, well, did anything go wrong? And I said, yes, but we fixed it with a formula. Well, what was this formula? And the pipe started to smoke and all that sort of stuff. And I said, the formula was the coefficient of utilization times the angle of repose times GOFSWVB. And they said, wow, what's that? Well, I said, the first part's baloney, and what happened is the guy had the box on, he had a stomach like me, and the box was down here, and he thought that was dead, and what it stands for is good old-fashioned steelworker bill belly. So I'm not going to give you a formula tonight. But I would like to briefly show you a few slides on what I do in the metal industry, and I'm not very good at operating this thing, so please bear with me. What you're going to hear tonight is not a paper and not a book. It's an actual deposition that I have put together of proof of a conspiracy, and I think we have a little bit, that's fine, I think. Proof of a conspiracy, and I'm a little bit sick and tired of having some people come up with some very good theories, and somebody says, well, where's the hard evidence? Well, when we're done here tonight, I'm going to show you what I think the hard evidence is, and I'm willing to stand up and stand behind it. I think tonight we have our first shot at really putting forth the truth. So first off, again, I was going to read this from the deposition, but that's boring, so we're just going to wing it. These guys are going to butt in when they think I'm getting off the deep end. And, okay, forward. Thanks. Okay. This is the type of equipment, when we talk about that we're using image processing, we're not talking about something in a nice clean laboratory. We're talking about something out in an automated steel line. And what you see here is a particular line where the cameras are there, thank you, Jack, and it's a CCD camera, and I'd be willing to bet that the same lens that's in that camera is in that television set back there. And that camera allows 250,000 sensors within that camera, each one of them looking at the intensity of light. The whole secret of what we're doing here is that if you look at all the mathematical formula and so forth, everything in this world is spatial. What that means is that everything occupies space. So if everything occupies space and someone takes a photograph, then surely if you have a device that can go through the various levels of black to white, you're going to be able to see things that you ordinarily wouldn't see in this composite black and white picture. Now, you can only see basically 30 shades of gray, but we're looking at 256 shades of gray. So on a fast, high-speed moving line, 2,000 feet a minute, 60 inches wide, we can look at every piece of that material and see whether the surface quality is up to par. Okay, here's some examples. This is an ingot. Now, most people know what an ingot looks like, I believe. This is a hot piece of material, and this has been looked at with machine vision, and what it shows in black and white on the grayscale is that blackened area is an area that is not evenly heated. It also shows where you're going to cut the end off so that you can maximize the yield within the piece and yet not cut off more than you have to. Here's another piece, and you can see this is another piece of material that is hot. And so what we're doing is we're looking at the radiated heat off the piece, and we're not using any external lighting, and we're checking it, and lo and behold, all of the uneven heating elements are shown in there as the various graphs. This is something that has allowed me to penetrate the photographs in the Kennedy assassination. This is a third dimension. I use the word loosely, but what it does is it looks at all of these little sensors, and where the sensors are bright, they're down flat. Where the sensors are up, there's more light reflecting back. That's the secret of everything. Here's some more material, and you can see how to your eye, you can see it with your eye, but whenever it's being processed, you don't have that ability. There's a piece you can definitely see where it's void up at the top up there. So now I'd like to show you how I got started. Here's one that shows the deformation of a piece of metal that's supposed to be flat and isn't, and so forth. Okay, how fast is moving? Well, 2,000 feet a minute. This is fast stuff. And incidentally, somebody mentioned today about the fact about could you see a bullet in the air? Well, there are high-speed cameras that have been used in the military, and they have experience with them. We may not be able to see a bullet, but we have looked at missile shells, and we actually catch it in midair all the way up to its trajectory. So there's nothing that can't be done today with the conditions being right. In November of 1988, I had a process going on in my office at my home looking at metal, the detection of metal. And the whole database in this computer system was based on the fact that if anything had metal in it, I could detect it. Prior to that, I had seen the Nova show on the day of Kennedy, and up until that time, I had always believed everything that they told to me. I'm of the age group where I believe, this is true justice in America. I don't dispute what I'm told. But the Nova show kind of triggered something in me that said, Tom, something doesn't sound right. So a few weeks later, there was a Geraldo show, and I knew it was coming on. And so on the Geraldo show, on my $150 VCR, it was a $3 tape that had about 15 programs on it. I taped the Geraldo show. The people that were in that particular show, some of them were David Bellin, John Davis, Jean Hill, whom I met yesterday, a very gutsy woman. I love her. Jim Mars, David Shine, Jim Tagan's up for still aware. Now those names didn't mean anything to me at that time, but I had this 2-hour program. And I watched it, and I thought to myself, I want to tell you my honest feelings. I thought, David Bellin really got the short end of the stick on that program. He was right. These guys, they're just pulling their chain. And also, Dr. West is a Democrat, and I'm a Republican. But what I did is one night when I was bored, I took the videotape of this picture. This is a picture by Jack White here, who in my opinion is one of the world's best photographers, bar none. And they showed this on the program, and this is a slide off of my $150 VCR with my $3.98 tape. And of course this is the Mormon picture, and up there he had outlined something. And I ran this tape through my machine because the only parts that are metal down here are the automobile. Because what I have found over the years is that the machine has never lied to me. Once I look at something and I know physically what it is, if it's wood and it says it's metal, I'm in big trouble because the basic philosophy of light reflection, which is, God's doing this, I'm not doing it. It has to be a scientific fact that is repeatable. And I ran this thing tape through, and a bright spot came out right up there and just knocked my eye out, just a pin drop. And I said to myself, oh, come on, Tom, what's going on here? Unfortunately, since November 1988, I haven't thought about making money, I haven't thought about anything. My wife needs curtains, and I'm doing this. But tonight, okay, we're going to bring this thing to a start of the first hard evidence of a conspiracy. And the reason I call it a montage of conspiracy is because I'm only going to use 4 things as my evidence. The Mormon photo, the Zapruder film, the Nix film, and 1 autopsy photo. And what I hope to do tonight, I've compressed 3 years of work into a document that I'm willing to go to the government with, and I'm sure Weck's going to go with me. And we're going to hopefully present a case that is going to have to challenge my technology. Either I'm a fake or I'm for real. I hope for all of our sakes I'm for real. I think I'm for real, and I hope to prove it, and I'll stand up here. These gentlemen are with me. So basically, that's where we stand on that. Now what happened was, this is the image that I got off of that little image. Now it's blown up now, but you can see on there that there's a basic shape of a badge. That is the thing that sparkled in my eye the very first time. And that's where we're starting. And now if we can turn it off. And I think Jim Mars would like to inject a few comments right now.
I'm just here in the capacity of interpreter. I'm going to try to interpret for those of you out there who, like myself, are not very technically orientated, not particularly computer orientated, and some of this may tend to go right over the top of your head. But just to kind of briefly give a quick comment here. Over the years, the skeptics of conspiracy have always said, if there's a conspiracy, where's the proof? Well, y'all have already seen slides, pictures, testimony. To my way of thinking, there's plenty of proof, but then they still say, but where is the hard scientific proof? Well, what's exciting, ladies and gentlemen, is that if Tom Wilson's technology is as he says, this is the hard, irrefutable scientific proof. The problem is going to be is that you've got to try to grasp what's happening here, and you've got to, for instance, the last slide he showed you, just look up at a big white blob up there, right? This is what his computer has blown up out of the Mormon photograph and focused in on this pinpoint, literally a pinpoint, that would be the badge on Badge Man, and he's got it up to this point. Now, to my understanding, here's what this is all about. As he just said, the human eye sees 30 shades of gray. His machine can see 256. This allows him to not only analyze the height and width in any photograph, no matter how bad it may be, but he can actually go in and strip away these layers of gray and reveal things that the human eye cannot see. Okay? And what you're going to see tonight, I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but I want to try to explain to you what you're going to see, so when they get into it, you'll at least know what you're supposed to be seeing. On the Badge Man photograph, he has established that there is a human being behind the fence on the grassy knoll, and that he has a badge on his chest, and that he is indeed firing a firearm, and that the puff of light in front of his face is smoke, okay, and not sunlight, and not an artifact of a film. When he gets to the Zapruder film and the next film, by taking these from two opposite points and looking at the same object or the same event, as he calls it, which is the presidential motorcade and the President Kennedy, he can actually pinpoint where all this happens. You will actually see how that he can use this computer technology to analyze the wound on the president's head to the point of going in, stripping away the layers we cannot normally see with our eyes, and actually observing the president's brain, the head cavity, the skull, etc. This is exciting stuff, but it's very technical. And then finally, on the autopsy picture, he's going to go in using this computer technology. He's going to look at this throat wound, and he's going to show you the trajectory. He's going to show you where it came in, where it went out, and what that wound looks like inside the president's throat. Okay? And again, if this technology is as it is described, and at this point, I have no reason to disbelieve it. I do. I've met with Tom Wilson on several occasions, and I stand by Dr. Webb. I think he's an honest, honorable man, and there's no doubt in my mind that he certainly believes what he's saying here. And with that, let's go on, and we'll see what we can see from this.
Okay, thank you. What I had hoped to do, but it's not going to be feasible, is I had some slides, but I'm going to have to narrate a little bit because we only have so much time. What I've done is I've taken and provided by location various things. And I'll just read the numbers off to you back. Later on or tomorrow, if somebody wants to get into the technical part of this stuff, I'll be glad. I'm not hiding anything. Everything that you see here, I have not patented because I felt that if I patent this ahead of time, it's going to allow some people to go out and try and shoot it down. So if I don't make anyone, so be it. This technology is going to come out in a court with the government, and they're going to have to answer with it or go with it. That's my goal here. Now, on these particular locations, we're going to see the following. The frontal shot to the neck, the frontal shot to the head, the actual frontal shot to the head. Now, I'll explain what that means. I'm using Jackie Kennedy's right arm in the air as my datum point because I'm correlating this. And Jack White knows the term photogrammetry, which to me is a bunch of baloney that means aerial mapping. We're looking, this man here is the best, okay? And they shot him down for a cheap buzzword. But we're going to look at Jackie Kennedy's right arm as she comes up in the Zapruder film, and it's the same right arm coming up in the next film. We're going to look at something that I found. I found a head particle in the air from President Kennedy after the headshot, the fatal headshot. There's another head part in the air. We're going to look at the shooter on the knoll. We're going to look at Gordon Arnold, the witness on the knoll. We're going to look at the Abraham Zapruder film, the Mary Mormon picture, the Orville Nix picture. I also talk about the unidentified man on the steps, but it's not relevant to tonight. And there's another famous picture that's been in all the books about the anomalous shape on the fence. I'm going to tell you what my opinion the anomalous shape is. And I'm going to show you an area on the Zapruder film that I have looked at time and time again, and I'm ready to make the statement it's an altered area in the Zapruder film that is not done in the developing of it. So we're going to start the tape here. And
You're going to show the autopsy picture.
yes, and well, I should mention something else. I have done three things. I've also done what I call an electronic autopsy, which is another program, and I only have a very smattering of it, but I've gone through 23 pictures of autopsy photos that were given to me by Dr. Weck, that were given to him by somebody else. I cannot tell you that these 23 photos are photographs of President Kennedy, but I can tell you that the 23 photographs are real photographs. And on one photograph in particular, I was talking to David Lifton. He's going to be very concerned about what I have to say about one part on one photograph. But those 23 photographs are real. Now, if they are real, how do we find out if they're the real assassination autopsy photographs? We go to the government and say, look, this is what we think they are. Show us what you have. You can look at what we did, but let us look at what you did. So we'll start this thing going here. Again, I'll be here tomorrow, so let's just try to do the best we can for the people at least see the bottom line here.
Lower the lights, please.
Lower the lights, please. I guess it's still too bright. Remember, if I can't read, we're in trouble. So let's do what we can do.
I think you'll be able to see everything okay at this light level, and he needs to be able to refer to his notes.
And if you see an image up here you want to freeze, well, just tell them what's called, okay? Okay, the first thing we're going to see is the basic units of evidence. I'm not going to use any theoretical evidence. I'm going to say, let's use these 4 pieces of evidence, and the bottom line here is that you can take any Mary Mormon picture you have, any Zapruder film you have, any mixed film you have, and we'll do the same thing that I'm doing on the ones that I have with your pictures. This is the proof. We're going to do it on any picture. There's the Zapruder film. I'm sure most everybody in this room is very familiar with this. I'm probably the only novice here. I'm not a researcher, and this was thrust upon me, but we're not going to drop it. We're going to see this thing through to the end. That's a portion of the Mormon photograph. This is the autopsy photograph we're going to look at. This is not the official autopsy photograph. This is the one that I'm going to speak about. The frontal shot to the neck. This is location 1 on the map. President Kennedy is coming down. He just come past the sign. All the images that you see tonight are taken right off of the frames you've seen, right off of these things. The computer has not generated anything. Anything that looks like a computer model is not a model, it's the image. Now to the eye, this looks very blurry right now, but on the left-hand side is the raw video. On the right-hand side, I have established a data base on this particular film for blood. Blood's going to come out red. Not that I'm coloring it red, but I'm saying that in this grayscale it's going to be blood. This is looking at the necktie knot of President Kennedy on the Zapruder film, and every area right where the bullet goes through it is necktie knot. There is the hole at the necktie knot, and you're going to see when the machine says it's blood. That's the actual blood that was on President Kennedy at the time that he was getting ready to clutch his throat. Now what I've done is projected things back so it's chronological in order. We're looking at the autopsy photo, and we're going to go down into the tracheotomy hole on the autopsy photo, and it's just like a gray level. We're going to go down into that hole, and we're going, and all this is documented. There's drawings and measurements and everything. This is what the human eye sees. There's a little blemish on the neck there. Here's the tracheotomy hole. We're going to tell the machine start to strip away the gray level.
That's the blemish, this is the hole.
Right. Start to strip away. So that we can see what's going on down in that hole. And what you're going to see coming up there is you're going to find that there is a hole in there in the back of his tracheotomy, of his tracheal tube, and Dr. Weck, correct me if I don't use the right terminology, but the hole is smaller than the smallest tracheotomy tube. If this hole here, see the little dot coming up? That's just like a piece of steel. If there's a hole in a piece of steel, it goes up when it's light and black when it's down. And this tells me that there is a hole in the back of the tracheotomy incision. Now, when we come to the other side, you're going to find out that we have a hole coming out the back of the neck and why you can't see it in various things. But this hole measures smaller than the smallest tracheotomy tube, which means that if it isn't a bullet hole that went from the grassy knoll, through the front of his neck and out the back, the doctor, when he performed the tracheotomy, had to have shoved the tube through the back of his neck because that hole is on the other side. So now we have one frontal shot from the grassy knoll. Now this is location 2 and 3. The car has proceeded down the street, and now he's going to be shot in the head. And this is really, I've seen this 1,000 times. I've seen it at night. It's shaking. It moves me. Every time I see it, I can hardly control myself because you're going to physically see all of his head parts in the air. You're going to see down into the top of his head off of the Zapruder film. On the bottom is the famous shot in the head from Zapruder. Up in the top is real-time nicks. I do not use camera rotation as my synchronism here, because in a steel mill, if you ever try to anticipate the movement of anything with anything else, you end up with a lot of hot steel in your lap. And if you remember the Jackie Gleason film where he's throwing pies in cardboard boxes, after a while there's no boxes, but there's a lot of pies. So what we're doing is we're tying these three pieces of evidence. There's Mary Mormon and Jean Hill. God bless her. She's never deviated for her statement. And I want to tell you, for what it's worth, Jean Hill is right. She is correct in everything she has said. So now what we're going to do, now that we have these pieces of evidence, and I'm sorry it's taking so long, but this is not a professionally edited thing. We're now looking at the Mormon picture, we're looking at the next film, Jackie's hand is going to be in the air, and so for where we are. Now maybe I can speed this up a little bit. See where we are here now. Okay, now the Mormon picture is frozen, and the Zapruder film is real time. Now, the thing I'd like you to notice is that in a color photograph, you can see a pink cloud. Everything in the human spectrum is really black and white, and it becomes color when it becomes certain wavelengths. So if we just ignore color, and we let the machine put a tagged false color on that we cannot change, the tagging of false color sometimes helps us to see anything. But in a normal Zapruder film, you just see like a nice white area on there. And shortly we're going to go in, and we're going to start to go in. Now, when you look at any of these pieces of material, like a head, in this particular situation, a piece of pizza, steel, ice cream, we looked at all this stuff, it's all the same. At a certain slice of gray level, there's a certain amount of visible spatial information, something that's occupying that space within those levels of gray. And so if you just start to strip off, you can take these off and you'll see things that may not make sense, but together with a few of them, they make something that does make sense. And this is why in the military, when a tank is running down and tracking a shadow on the road, it tries to run up the tree because it thinks the tree is the road. It's because it doesn't have enough information of the gray level of those two particular items. So surely we'll get with it here. I'm sorry this takes so long, but now here's the shot. This is what ordinarily you'd see with your eyes. A nice bright spot. Bob Roden has done a tremendous job on this. Look, this job right here. There's the actual, when the moment the missile struck President Kennedy, the dark area down in the bottom is his head and his back. Now put your hair off a little bit. There's his head. Move it down a little bit.
Now again, this is a blow-up of the frame of the Zapruder
here. I'm going to tell you what you're looking at, and later on you'll see a lot of it, but you're just going to have to take my word for it right now. Here is the hole in President Kennedy's head, the back of it. He slumped down on Jackie's shoulder. Here is the hole of the missile that came out of the tracheotomy from the shot from the front. Here is a piece of scalp here and here. All these little pieces of scalp are scalp that have been blown out from the top of his head from a force coming through here, going right up through the top of his head. So this is the shot. This is what's in that image as we look at this gray level. Now we're going to continue on with the machine on the same picture.
Continuing to strip away more gray areas, the little pieces begin to disappear.
But that's all his head parts. Now, what we've done is, if you look, what we've done is we've got rid of the little stuff, and we're going to concentrate on the big stuff. There's a big piece of scalp down there. You can still see the head, a big piece of scalp, and another piece of scalp higher to it. Now, this tells us, this doesn't necessarily tell us which way to force. They're the same pieces. Again, I want to stress, none of these images have been altered in any manner. None of them. Anything you see is real, done by the processing. It is not enhanced. It's for real. Now we know that his head's in, there's some parts of his head in the air, but we don't know, what the impact was. Now, again, remember blood from the next shot? The computer says anything that is flesh colored, show me in red. And there's the parts of his head. And now you can start to see down here. Now we're going to get rid of the parts of the ear. Now we're going to start going into this big black hole, just like a big dent in a piece of steel. We're going to color it so you can see it. And this is the top of his head. Now remember, it's exaggerated a little bit. Here you are. Here is the missile that came through. This is the scalp, this is the skull, and this is President Kennedy's brain. You're physically looking at the brain in his head with a hole in it from a missile at the time that this particular frame was shot. And now we're going to measure this. This looks like it's 3D. I used the word 3D to Jack White, and he said, you're full of baloney, but I didn't mean 3D. I meant that when you put the shades of gray together, it takes the depth. You see that slice of gray there? That's a slice of gray. Here's the missile. Now, here is President Kennedy's brain. Dr. Wecker looked at this. This is one of the first things I ever showed him. I didn't even know what I was looking at. We've rotated it so that if it's any image or any grayscale alteration, it's going to change. The brain never changes, the skull never changes, the head never changes. Now what's particularly interesting in this is that when you take this particular view, which is showing it, and take the trajectory, and maybe you might want to show Jim where President Kennedy said it.
The entrance is right about there. The entrance is about here, and the exit is just as the witnesses told you earlier, in the right occipital.
Now, this is not a computer-generated image. This is something that is unique in what I've been doing in the metal industry. It's called pixel data flow. And what it means is when we look at 256 shades of gray down here and down here, the camera's picking up 250,000 different points in an array. It's called a CCD array. But what we're also... The back of the head,
yes. This is a different frame of the Zapruder film blown up. What you're looking at is the back of President Kennedy's head. That area is the head. Tom, show the neck. The neck is...
Here's the head.
There's the head.
There's the exit hole in the neck.
There is the bullet hole at the back of President Kennedy's neck. That is an exit hole from the bullet in the front. Now, can you point out the back?
Now, we're going to go in and we're going to refine this, but there it is. Now, you see this hole? Here is the hole in his head. We cannot see the brain now because it's in this particular gray area, but it's physically there. Here is the exit hole. His head is bent over. Here is the exit hole that lines up perfectly with the input of the tracheotomy shot.
Explain how you can tell the difference between an entrance hole and an exit hole.
Okay, an entrance hole is small and an exit hole is large. So if, for instance, if President Kennedy would have been hit from the back in this particular location, you would see a hole like this up here, just like is on the official autopsy hole. We'll get into that in a minute. And you would see a hole like this where his face was. This is basic science. It's a deformation or the plasticity of material. Material doesn't go against science. So when you have a force coming in, and in this case this force is coming, and when you look at the autopsy photo, it's coming in right about here, and it's going out, and the head is going out with it. Now, maybe more of President Kennedy's brain was lost, but it might have been lost in another frame of a picture a few seconds down the road. What's interesting about this picture is that he has a hole in his head. He has an exit hole coming out the back of his neck. But if you can look at this looks like a little wee something, but it's not deep, which on a piece of metal means this is a surface blemish. This is a hole. And what this turns out to be is that this is a hit in the back, from the back, through the coat, and we're actually looking where the bullet went through the threads of the coat, and that's why the hole is this little wee dark area here is the entrance hole, but this is the threads in his coat that were deformed by the penetration of the missile. I might also say that whenever we checked the angular shot of his back, it did not come from the sniper's lair in the 6th floor of the book depository building. It did not. Beg pardon? What frame? We're not going to talk frames. I don't care what frame it is. Okay? I don't ever want to see a frame in this thing because all I'm going to do is I'm going to look at motion and triangulation of events to fix things that never change, like the cornerstone, the poles, the walls. Things that happen are still there, okay?
It is a frame, but he doesn't deal with frames. He's not familiar with them, and I'm sure
I don't even know what frame it is.
I'm sure at some point somebody can figure out exactly what frame it is.
I'm sure that people that have normal technology must have the frame, but you see, I don't want to know the frame because I want to know this may have happened. There it is again. For all I know, this tape that I'm looking at, they could have made everything and spliced everything up, and I'm looking at an event that happened before it really happened. I'm an event person, and the steel mill, you better be right, because if you aren't right and it isn't at the right spot, look out, man. Now here is an excellent picture here. You can see it. The exit hole from the neck, the hole in the head in the occipital region, and the entrance hole in the back. So, from this Zapruder film, we can make the following conclusions, which I'm ready to stand up in court and say that the technology has shown me on this particular Zapruder film, and as far as I'm concerned, any Zapruder film in the world, I don't care what it is, if it is a trumped up Zapruder film, give me that film and I'll show you where it is. But for right now, we have 3 holes in President Kennedy from this bit of information, one coming in from the knoll through the neck at the knot tie and out the back, another one coming in from the knoll from the right and exiting the top of his head, and one coming in from the upper part of the right back. Now, Jackie's located a little bit farther down here, and tomorrow I'll have these maps and so forth, but there's a lot of pieces of paper on the ground, and we'll talk about that later. But you see how her hand goes up in the air? That's my datum point. When her hand goes up in the air on the Zapruder film, and when it goes up in the air on the Nix film, I know that the events are sequenced. Okay, now here's the headshot again, and we're just talking about Jackie. Now, excuse me. The head particle, the third head particle that I'm going to talk about, as you go down through the Nix film and the Zapruder film, and it's apparent on both things, once I got involved in finding this stuff out, it's like a disease, you know. You want to keep going and going and going. And so I asked the machine to isolate the pieces of paper on the ground and any other abnormality that's in the environmental scene, and tell me if there's anything in there.
You should tell them that you have databases which
Okay, I should tell you that I have databases. Thank you, Jeff.
recognize that.
I have databases. I can take anything. If you want me to look at a pizza, you give me a pizza and I'll look at a good pizza and then I can tell you what a bad pizza is. It's cause and effect. So I have a database now of the parts of President Kennedy, and I don't mean to sound gruesome, but now I'm telling this machine, I want you to look at these 2 scenes, just like in the original one. If there's any part of his skull or any part of his skin that's apparent up there, I want you to show it to me. And lo and behold, 14, I don't want to confuse you, but I'm not going to do this. I'm going to make a statement now that all along I believed that the Mary Moorman photograph was a photograph of the headshot. I heard Bob Roden say something today about a 1/6 of a second. I never heard that before. The Mary Moorman photo was not the time of the headshot. And this is what I consider to be the Bible. The actual headshot is 7 feet 6 inches farther west than the Mary Moorman photograph. And I'll explain later how I know that. But 14 feet 3 inches farther west from the 7'6", there is a piece of President Kennedy's head in the air. And I was talking to these 2 gentlemen here today, and we're speculating. I don't know if we're right, but I know we can find out exactly right. There was a piece of skull found on the grass. We're able to take this piece of head part, this third part, and we now then can calculate and by trajectory and find out basically where it fell. Now, if it fell near there, and Jack White is going to give me a piece of this head part that was found, and I can guarantee you, if this is it, we'll be able to give you a three-dimensional image of that very same part off of the Zapruder film and the Nix film, if it's there.
It's called the Harper fragment.
Yeah, that's it. Now, there it is. This is not paper. This is the part of the head, and I'm going to show you a little process that I do here to prove it. Every time I find something, I have to go through many, many modular type proving systems to make sure that I'm not wrong. To the best of my ability, I have done everything I possibly humanly can to prove that everything I'm telling you is correct and factual. It takes a long time for me to satisfy myself. I'm totally satisfied with everything I'm going to show you tonight. I might also mention that I've done some images for a third party that you're not going to hear about tonight, and when you do hear about them, you're going to be visibly shocked. You're going to be visibly shocked, because I think the ultimate story of who's up there in those windows is going to come out in the very near future, and it's not going to be pretty. Anyhow, we're still on this head part that's in the air.
We should say there that he's referring to other Kennedy pictures which he can't tell you about at this time.
I just can't think about it. Okay, now this is a little thing about proof. You see how everything looks like it's cast in plaster. Here's the head part on the Zapruder film, and you see how the shadows look like, there's this man, there's the shadow. They all occupy space. Everything here is space. So if it's for real and it's not air, and there it is right there on the Zapruder film, and you can almost see. Now, the other thing is that you're not looking at my master tapes. My master tapes are in 3 different locations, so Tom Wilson isn't here in a month. The truth is still going to come out. And we hope that isn't so. And here is the next film, and it's the same head particle in the air. You see why I don't care about frames? It's the same scene. Thank God for Mary Mormon and Mr. Nix and Mr. Zapruder, because this is the only piece of evidence that's frozen in time. Everything else has changed. People's memories fade. The one thing that hasn't changed, there's the same piece blown up. I'm not going to get into analog and digital, okay? It's the thing. Now here's a false color put on so your eyes can see it better. But I have no way of changing what the shades are. For instance, if something is homogeneous and it's nice and plain and clear, it'll come out in a nice purple color. If it starts to turn yellow or something, that means that it's another group of shades of gray. But you can imagine what we're doing on every frame here, every 30th of a second. There's the same piece. Every 30th of a second, we're processing a frame which is made up of 2 fields, a positive and a negative. So if some piece of information is hidden in one part of a field, it might be in the other. There it is. So I can guarantee you this is a head part, it's in the air. What I don't know, there it is, was this from another shot, which is certainly from the front if it is, because it's heading toward the back, or is the head part flying off because of the acceleration of the automobile? I don't know. Further investigation will certainly be able to bear that out. Also, if the shape of this matches the shape of what Jack's talking about, then we'll know for sure. So now we have a third head shot. This is how we measure it. This is an actual analog. This is an actual plain line here that goes from the head part to, in this case, the Kennedy and so forth. And see how the little wiggly lines bend down where the hedges are? This is looking at every piece of information on a flat piece of photograph, but it's really X number of shades. This is the numbers you get out. I didn't think you wanted to see these tonight, because it'd probably fill this room. But for every image we have numerical data. We can go back and find the exact spot. This is how I'm able to look at any image, and once I find out any known constant, everything else will be linear because it's also in depth on grade level. So if I know a rifle is 6 feet long, and I put the same thing on up at the papers that he's carrying, they better be 11 inches wide. And they aren't, incidentally. Okay, now we're going to talk about the shooter on the null. Here's the exact location of the shooter on the knoll, and here again is the Zapruder film of Gene Hill and Mary Mormon. Incidentally, I took a Polaroid photograph in my home 27 years ago with an 800 model Polaroid camera. The picture of my backyard was laying with the camera for 27 years. I didn't know it. I've taken it out and I analyzed it, and I can tell you that no matter what condition Mary Mormon's photograph is in, the information is still there. Mine was laying in the cellar in a box. My son's here. Is that right, John? Okay. So now what we're going to say is, first off, 2 shots were from the grassy knoll. 1 shot was from the back that we've been able to establish so far. We now have 3 shots.
But not from the depository.
Right, but not from the sniper's lair in the 6th floor depository. Okay. Now we're going to go back and we're going to look at that badge that I have, and we're going to go in and see if we can look through the smoke. Is it smoke? Is it not smoke? Somebody said to me in line today, they didn't know who I was or anything. He said, boy, I hope we find a smoking gun this time. If ever there was a place for a smoking gun, it's here. I loved it. Okay. I'm going to show you down into the left face of the shooter on the knoll, the man that fired the shot that killed President Kennedy. I'm going to show you him from that little picture that you saw when we first started. And we're going to do this in a series of progressions, but I'm going to just read some things that I can't elaborate on too much tonight because of the time, but I'm going to say that Kennedy was shot in the neck and the head by a shooter behind the fence on the grassy knoll. There are 2 shooters identified. I want to stop this. This is a photograph that was done for me by a fellow that was almost as good as Jack White and did photographic photographer type enhancement. And this was obtained from a photograph that was made from a negative, that was made from a negative, that was made from a negative from the Mormon picture. And so I just want to show you what you can do without any of this black magic. You're going to see that this is the shooter. You're going to see that this is an object that is apparent in both the Zapruder film, the Mary Mormon picture, and the Nix film. And this, my friends, is Mr. Gordon Arnold. And you're going to see later on that Mr. Gordon Arnold really was there, and that Tom Wilson can prove that Mr. Gordon Arnold was where he said he was in the film that came out on the men who killed Kennedy. And I've searched long and hard to find out whether Mr. Arnold really was there, and I'll tell you, he was. Okay, now we're going to take this image and we're going to put it through computer analysis, not enhancement. And now this is something like a piece of smoke. And this is, you're going to look at a month and a half in about 3 minutes here. And now you see the badge coming out. And now you see another little white cloud here, which I'm going to tell you is definitely a shot from a second gun, 1/5 of a second before this shot. This shooter is standing to his left. There's his patch coming out. You can see it, whatever it is. You're starting to see the form of a hand. We're going to call this the primary shooter. This is the man whose trajectory blew the top off of Kennedy's head from the front. Now you can see an earlobe start to come out. I haven't done any of this. I can't control what's coming out. This is done off the image. This is basic science at work. Now you're going to see a pseudo color on there. You're going to see that he had a little thing on his pocket flap down here. It looks a little bit distorted, but look how the smoke now has depth. You see how it's changing color from white on the top and so forth? And I'm going to make the statement that I'll show you later. Some researchers have said, this is not a shooter. Here's his head coming out. This is not a shooter. This is foliage and light and leaves. And you know what? They're absolutely correct. And then there are other researchers who said, no, this is a man firing a gun on a rifle on the grassy knoll. And you know what? They're absolutely correct. Both of these theories are correct. And we're going to show you. Now you see his eye coming out. Right there. There's his head, there's his hair, there's his sideburns, there's a hole in his ear. And he has a mark on his left cheek. I'm just going to read you what I have here. Here comes the pupil in his eye. You're looking at the murderer.
Is that his right eye?
Here's his pupil in his eye, right there.
His left eye?
Left eye. Here's his left ear, and here's a mark. Now, can you see the eye now? If I had an original photo, I think I could look in and see what he's seeing. He's probably seeing, But here's a mark, and I just want to read you what it is. The shooter is not wearing a hat. He has thick, coarse hair with a jagged part on the left side of his head. He is not wearing eyeglasses. His iris is colored brown. Yes, we can tell from a black and white photo what color his eyes are. He has a mole or pox mark 1.76 centimeters down from the center line of his left iris and 1.62 centimeters to the right of the center line of his left iris is viewed. The mark is 0.374 centimeters by 0.315 centimeters in area. It has a small circular area within the depressed area, and you're looking at it, and a very small, slightly raised area also within the depressed area. The second shooter is to the right. The rear of the primary shooter is viewed. He has fired a shot 1/5 of a second before the primary shooter shot at the time of the Mormon photograph. He has an identification tag and button over his right pocket, similar to the primary shooter's right pocket. He is firing with the butt of a rifle over his left shoulder. A portion of his rifle smoke is visible. Now, the other thing that's going to come out here is the fact that it's a badge. And what I have to show you isn't very good. But I wanted so desperately to have a Dallas policeman's badge come out. It is not a Dallas policeman's badge. It is a badge with a head of an eagle on it. Now here's his eye. Can you see the pupil in his eye now? In his eye, there's the hole in his ear, there's the pox mark. Very, very coarse hair. There's his eye. There's the iris of his eye.
This looks somewhat lopsided because of just the way that the machine is.
The shades are gray. But here's how we can measure it. So from that pinhole of information, this is what came out. Any government station that has the type of equipment I have can do the same thing. And probably has. I want to emphasize it. Any government station that has the type of equipment I have can do the same thing. Will they? We'll find out. That's the pox mark.
Because you know the size of those pixels.
Yes, there are 250,000 little dots on there. We know where everyone is in this dimension, and here I'm measuring it. I'm actually measuring it from the center of his eye to the center of the pock mark, and then I measure from the center of the pock mark to the center of his ear. And if you have enough time and enough inclination, you can go ahead and tell this guy whether this guy needs eyeglasses or not. So it's this kind of data, okay? At some point I had to stop. It's just like, this is my first time at a researchers assembly, and I can't believe that you folks have had to keep hashing this over and hashing this over. I'm glad that you have. But you shouldn't have to hash this over. There's no reason to keep this suppressed. So I'm going to do my best to give you guys a shot, and then I'm going to go do some other things, I hope. And we need curtains for the living room. But again, here's another view of the smoke from another aspect, and you'll see the badge coming out, and you have to look very hard, but that is the head of an eagle facing that way. But you're going to see his face come out, and ultimately you're going to see his right eye hidden by the telescopic sight. Again, this is still the second shooter. Oh yeah, here's a good shot. Is that appropriate music for this one? Okay, there's a good shot of the badge. And see, what this does is this says that their intensity to the pixels, it means that there's something really there. And if it's background, you'll see a nice flat plane. Here's the maximum part of the reflective image. Here's his face. There's his left eye. His right eye is completely obliterated by a piece of metal, which in this case is the telescopic sight. Here's the badge. There he is again. This is another program looking at the same image, but they come out a little bit different. But everything's in the right spot. Okay, so Here's the bag, and this ended up to be the eagle's beak. Here's the eagle's eye. I've gone to gun shows and bag shows, and I can't find any bag. I don't know whether this is a bogus bag or what it is. But, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a Dallas Star. I don't know what that means. I think one person knows, and that's Mr. Gordon Arnold. He had to be able to see this. Mr. Gordon Arnold was 27 feet away from this man.
Looks kind of like a postal service.
I think anything now. Anybody got a theory on the postal service? The mailman on the road. Here's his ID. Here's his ID, and here is the button on his coat. There is his ID badge. If I had an original photo, I probably could tell you the name on it. Here is the button on his coat. This is his pocket. It's right in the right spot. It's right on his right button, right where he always wears them. There's the badge again. Okay. There it is. You see an eagle? You know, the neural system works in such a way that I can tell you anything and you'll believe you're seeing it. I'm trying not to tell you too much. I want you to see it, but, you know, we only have, what, 6 days? Okay. Here is the Gordon Arnold. Now this is extreme. Oh wait, I beg your pardon. It's not. This is going to be the camera device. Here's another thing that came out. On the Mary Mormon photo, you saw that device in the beginning. It was just to the shooter's right, and to his left that he viewed it. In the Nix film that I had, and incidentally I've been to the archives and seen what the public sees for the Nix film and the Fruiter film and under the Freedom of Information Act, I have tried to track back exactly where the films were produced that I was looking at. I ran into a stone wall. The archives made a very valiant effort for me. The people were very nice, but you know I can't find out where they came from. And I'll tell you, with what I saw with my eyes at the archive is not the same one that I'm looking at here. There's a difference. I can't explain it, but who knows. Anyhow, as you proceed down the next film, which is cut off of the top of my copy, and Bob Groden, I understand there is a copy that has the black part in it, is that correct? I haven't seen that. But what you're going to see in this black hole up here, here's the steps going up. This is where Gene Hill ran up. There's a big black hole here, but you can't see it right now. You're going to see something like, you're going to see a flash of white here. Down here. We're really up here now, but you can see little specks of white. And the machine showed me that there was one speck in this great big piece of black that was brighter than any other. And so I went in and did some image processing on that speck, and lo and behold, I found the same object on the Nix film as is on the Mary Mormon photo. And I'm going to read this while you look at it here. And what this turned out to be is, and I can't explain why, but here it is. Here's the shooter now. You can see the bag in his form. We're talking about this little blob right here. Remember, there's a lot of foliage and leaves and so forth. The camera type device is located in the Mormon photograph to the left of the primary shooter as viewed. It is also detected in the Nix film. It starts from on. The third person behind the fence is holding the camera in his right hand over the right side of the camera. 4 fingers, the lens portion. Now you see the camera. Here's the camera. You're going to see the lens and the aperture come out, and this is some sort of a device, and you're going to see his fingers right around this side. Now, can you see the sort of shape of the camera? My theory on this, and I'm trying not to theorize, but what I think it is possibly not to take a picture, but it may be possible that there's a third person using the camera as a ranging tool to assist the shooters on his left as to where the location. There's his fingers right here. They might be assisting him. He's at 35 feet, he's at 100 feet, whatever. I'm guessing. Now, when you look at, if I just knew what type of camera it is, there's the fingers right there. Here's the lens. Doesn't it look like a Polaroid camera, the front of it? This is a bellows. I haven't gone in to find out whether this is cloth or metal or what, but this is definitely a viewing piece right here. If I knew the type of camera it was, and we could actually tell what the focal plane is, we'd know whether it was a ranging device or not, because some of these things aren't any good. They're closer than 50 feet, so I just can't answer that. But it's on 2 pieces of film, and now what we're going to do is go in, and lo and behold, you're going to find out that that same device is right here. Now remember, on the Mormon picture, she's way down here looking up, but Nix is coming by, and so it's not, here's the fence line, it looks like it's below the fence line, but when you take the angle of the shot of the next film, it probably is at the top of the fence. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this analog signal and we're going to digitize it so that we can see squares in there. We're going to find out where the fence line is, the trees are, the sky, the air, and so forth. And I don't know what it is, but it's something that's in 2 pieces of film. It's right here. It's right there. Now you can see what I'm doing here is I'm actually letting you look at the scenes that were grabbed, and this is done through many, many steps. Some of the things on the shooter that you've seen have taken the machine a week and a half to perform the function. A week and a half. This is not easy. Anyhow, this is the same device, but it's in a digitized form. And this is the trees in the background. Here it is. This is the lens on that device. You can see how it's a nice black square. In this particular case, that's glass.
You know it's glass because of your data?
Yes, I know it's glass.
In other words, the machine has a data bank that says at this level of gray, this is glass. And so that's how it goes with this image.
Once you know what, for instance, in this field mill or any other, when you're making pizzas or ice cream, once you put it in front of the camera and get the analysis of what the ideal unit is, then everything else is a reflection of anything other than ideal. So now we're going to go into Gordon Arnold. I'm just going to project a little bit so we can speed this thing up a little bit. But Gordon Arnold, the witness on the knoll, has been identified and precisely located within the Mormon photograph. He has a camera in his right hand over his right eye. He has an army cap on his head with a medallion on the cap. He is 20 of this guy, and he's large. And so what I did, you'll find later on, is I came to Texas for the first time, went down and saw the knoll for the first time after I had done everything up to now, and took some photographs, and went back to Pittsburgh, and put them on the computer. And you know what? I couldn't make Mary Mormon be in the right spot. This is the dramatic part of the thing. We're going out with a tremendous crescendo or a big spot, I don't know. Anyhow, I went back home. My son was up on the shooter, and I had the shooter, if I can get you acclimated here, when you walk up the steps, there's 2 large trees. There's a tree in the foreground and a tree in the background. I had the shooter up toward the road, and because that's Mary Mormon was a headshot. And so I took these photographs. My son pretended he was firing a gun. And I thought, you got it made, right? Well, nothing fit. Nothing fit. When Kennedy was in the right spot, Mary Mormon was in the wrong spot. The shooter was in the wrong spot, and nothing fit. So I decided that I had to go back to Dallas, and I had to come up with a way of finding out who was where, and we'll come to that in a minute. I'm going to make one other statement about a little area here. And that is that I think Bob Rose covered very well about the frames are missing and all that sort of thing, and I'm sure he's right. And when I met Bob about a year ago, I told him that I thought that the footage film had been altered, and he said, yes, indeed it was, and I told him a little bit about what I thought, and he said, well, it's possible that it was in the filming of it, but I'll come to that in a minute. There's a little anomalous stake right here. It looks like a little man carrying with binoculars through here. This was first noticed, and Kim Thompson brought it out in his book, 6 Seconds. See this little shape here? A lot of people have tried to say that that's a person or a thing there. And this, there it is. Doesn't it look like a man looking with binoculars? Right here. Well, what we've done is we've done a stream analysis of it, and I wouldn't make this statement if I wasn't perfectly sure that I can say this, and I'm going to read you my results. See, when this is green, and this is trees, and this is green, and this is trees, then this is trees. If this is white, this is daylight, or something else. The anomalous shape of the fence in the Mormon photograph is shown to be only daylight and foliage. The remainder of fence line shows no other abnormalities on this image. Several authors have alluded that this anomaly represents the location of an assassin, and that this is the spot where the acoustic evidence also places an assassin. In my opinion, my opinion. Meticulous image processing with computer analysis has proven beyond any doubt that the anomaly is foliage sky background shadows and nothing else. In a video release showing an interview with Mr. Gordon Arnold, a man with a helmet is discussed as being near the shooter on the knoll in the Mormon photograph, and I have to tell you that my image processing has not been able to detect a man with a helmet in the Mormon photograph, the video release, or any other photograph I have analyzed. This is the final proof. Here's a little guy with a binocular, and you see how they've seen all the environmental is the same height and everything else. It's the same. There's no other object in there. Okay, now we're going to come into the area of the Zapruder film, and I don't know why it is. I don't know whether it's only on the copy that I use, which is off of a $3.98 tape off of a televised broadcast, but there is two areas in this one frame. This is still on the guy with the binocular. I'm sorry I took too much time here. Oh, this is going to show you going down to the grayscale. Every time you see the color change and every dot change, this means that every time it changes in any portion of this image, there is a gray level that is different. See how the trees come out in the sky, and see how it turns purple and green. So if I were to stop it right here, I could analyze that. And then I could make it get smaller, and I could find out where it disappears, and so forth and so on. This is how this stuff works. Okay, now in the Zapruder film, there's two areas that are really goofy to me, and that is that for some reason, right here, here's the car coming down the street. In area 13, the grassy, here's the Zapruder up here looking this way. This is the scene you see. I've taken the field and the frame of the images of the arm here, and when you go to a 60th of a second to the frame in the next, to the field in the next frame, you're going to find that whoever did this, when they took the elbow, it's bent this way, and they made the elbow go backwards in the next 60th of a second. This was done by a halftone process. I don't know what happened, but somebody screwed up is the best way I can say it. This is one raw video image, and this is the processed image. And what you're going to see coming up a little bit later is for some reason they've taken the grassy area in here, and they've actually obliterated it. Can you see how this thing bends this way, this way, and this way? It's very subtle. But this is the 60th of a second difference, and they're going opposite way. This is fine. This is exactly right the way it should be. Now right in here, in this location, and maybe Bob knows the answer, Bob heard this, but right here I have established in my own mind that this is not part of the process of photograph, developing it. I've taken this thing down to the core of the Mylar. I did a study for DuPont on a Mylar that's used in videotapes 5 years ago. And I have a database on Mylar. And this is what I've done. I've gone down to the grain of this particular film. It's basically the same. I don't know why. I don't know whether there's something on here that's been wiped out. You can't see it. Okay, now I told you I went to the knoll and we took these pictures and nothing fit. And in the job that I was in for 30 years, if you weren't sure, you had a building fall down or something bad happened. So you have a tendency as an engineer to double check yourself. This is the scene in 1990. This is the scene in 1963. Together, I'm going to let the machine look at them and tell me what difference there is between 1990 and 1963. I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview here. I don't want to make you think this is black magic. But what we've been able to ascertain is why the people that said they saw a form of a man were right, and why the people that saw a shooter were a form of a man are right. When I was able to find out exactly where everybody was, this film in 1990, this picture, and I have it on a slide, and we didn't have the time to do what I want to do, but if you look real hard as we go through here in 1990, you're going to see the shape of a shooter. It is a phenomenon that is, it's unbelievable. And when you look at the trees and the grass and the wall and everything else, you're going to find out that you can see both. Now, where was the real shooter if the other thing is the form of a shooter in sky? And we're going to show you how we can prove that, where he was and why it looked like that. You're looking at 1963, you're looking at 1990.
Is that real time?
Real time. Real time. Now, what I decided that I had to do was come back to Dallas and use a series of targets to be able to develop where things really were. And so I asked my wife if she would mind if I made some pie plates up with some bicycle reflectors and reflector cases. Would she come out and stand in the middle of the street and hold a pie plate up in her face? And she said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "Well, you don't think I'm going to do it, do you?" And so what we did is that we spent the day here, and I tried the target, but I don't know what I do with it. It's about this round. And I stopped one of the targets right on this wall.
Bicycle reflector.
Yeah. And when I met Bob Roden, he said, "Are you the one that put that reflector on the wall? It's been driving me crazy." And Jim, you tell him what you said to me about the reflector on the wall. Remember, you were talking to me, you saw the reflector on the wall, and you wondered who put it there?
Yeah, I saw that at the time.
So that was me.
Snow shooting, I thought, who stuck a bicycle reflector?
And so here's my wife down there, and there's a reflector. Now what I've done is I took this reflector first, and in my home office, here's my pie plate. Would you put a pie plate in front of your face and walk around with a grassy knoll? I'm still married. But anyhow, here's another reflector. All these reflectors mean something. They all mean something to me. It's a way of identifying a lot of things. And so what I'm going to do now, just like the pictures, I'm going to take a real picture, a real autopsy photo, a real anything, and I'm going to go in with the machine and I'm going to analyze it. And this shows you the power of these machines now. We're going to go in and we're going to show you, we're going to do what's called a histogram, and all this is a fancy way of saying it in about 3 minutes. I have all the empirical data and visual data that tell me exactly, in all the grayscales, over 250,000 points, exactly what this thing is. And I have a number to prove it. And when we go to verify some of these shots, we're going to prove it statistically, numerically, imagery, physically, any way you want. Okay. Now, this is the same thing, and the machine's going to show you this is not a zoom, this is an electronic magnification of the information that's contained within that particular reflector. You can see the reflector manufacturer had a problem, and you know they're not uniform? I got cheated. Cost was $1.98, it wasn't cheap. So anyhow, now I know what the reflector is. And so now I went to the grassy knoll. I pasted the reflector on the corner where the concrete meets, because that's still there from 1963. I had the target move around, and so by being able to triangulate. Now this is very important that you understand this. We're going to show where Gordon Arnold was hidden to the human vision in the Mormon photograph. We're going to show you why the shooter has been identified as sky and foliage. There's the target. My wife is standing at the height. Do you see this form here? Can you see this? Does it look like the form of a human? This is 1990 we're looking at this. This isn't even November 22nd. It's in the early part of November. Here's Gordon Arnold over here, and my wife's short, so here's Gordon Arnold's head. Well, is there a shooter here, or is there a form? And for all you theorists, the shooter is exactly in the middle of the form. And if you look back in here, you'll see a little black dot. It's going to come out very predominant. By being able to coordinate the Nix film with the Zapruder film, with the Mormon picture, I know down to the inch where all of the players were in this bad escapade. And I'm saying that the primary shooter was located just to the left of this tree that you're viewing. And when you're going to watch image processing, you're going to see this target in 1990 come out behind the shooter. In 1963, you're going to see exactly where his gun was. Now what this did, once I found out where he was, I had the shooter down here. Once I moved the shooter back to here, which meant that the Kennedy headshot is just as the car comes around the visible point, the visible trajectory right here. Everything locked into place. Everything fits. The trees, the wall, the sidewalk. Some of the poles didn't fit because they were moved. That's from 1963. But anyhow, I think you're going to be able to see. If you're just watching this area, watch a little black circle to come out. Your neural system, the way a human being sees, the light reflection power coming back to your eyes is completely obliterating the scene behind it. But when we take this form and make it disappear because it is more forward in the image, it is lighter. You see the little black dot coming out? That is the exact spot of the rifle or the shot that put the bullet in President Kennedy's head from the front. Right there.
And for some of you that may be confused about how a bullet comes in and comes out the top, let me go back and look at the Zapruder film, and you find that Kennedy was over to the side with his head tilted kind of down, and that means the bullet comes in this way and comes out this way, and yet it's on a straight trajectory. It's the angle of his head.
Now, I want to speed this up a little bit, but we go on. And then the other thing I did is I've taken all of these scenes and I verified with the measurement devices you saw, and I check it to the fixture of things that have not moved. But it just is uncanny. I never would have believed this, that you can see. And I've looked at slides with Jack White. Well, I looked at all the slides he had, and he has a tremendous catalog of them. And I can see shots that he took with a camera 5 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, and the same form is still there on the grassy knoll, and maybe it's even there today, I don't know. I know they trimmed the trees back and stuff, but that form was there before they trimmed it. There's my reflector up there, and the machine is actually honing in, and then it goes and makes the main.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't understand how you're seeing a gun in the 1990 photograph.
No. I don't see a gun there. What I've done is I've taken the Mormon photograph and I found out where it's located. But in order to find out if all of the angles fixed, I had to go back and put a reflector where I think.
That's one of his reflectors.
This is on the reflector, okay? What I'm doing now that I know where the shooter is, I'm checking all the angles off of the Mormon picture, but I checked the same angles in 1990 from the same point. Can you see how the line is coming down here from this corner point? There's no reflector now. Can you see how the line is coming down from President Kennedy's head on the Mormon photograph? What this means is that if he was really shot here, it would have to go through the concrete wall. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and I know this is a little bit confusing.
I think you're confused because he's using the term shooter. Well, what he's referring to is there is a configuration of the light coming through the trees that seems to form a human figure, okay? And there's no actual person there, but he's saying that this same configuration can be seen today and can't be seen in the Mormon photograph, which is pretty amazing. I mean, it's just a form of light in the trees.
So therefore, if you're looking at the Mormon photograph and you see a blow-up of it, okay, you'll see what you think is a form.
So, and right where your arrow is at, there's a reflector back there?
There's a reflector right there. See this little white hole?
And your white is where?
And the reflector is behind the scene. It's behind the fence.
It's tacked on a pole. It's tacked on a pole.
Yes, it's tacked on, nailed on there.
What astounded him and what is kind of amazing is that this reflector represents the point where he had located in these analysis of the actual gunman, and it's right in the middle of this light coming through the tree leaves that tends to show to the human eye a figure. So in other words, the actual gunman was in the unreal figure of the light coming through the tree.
The light coming through the trees is so bright that you can't see the person behind you because your eyes are identifying his brightness.
In other words, coincidentally, in the Mormon picture, Badge Man is in the exact spot where light is coming through the trees if he weren't there.
Yeah, and this explains why that even if someone was looking up there directly at him, they most likely would not have seen him because their eye would have picked up this bright sunlight, and it would have prevented them from seeing the figure that was there.
Was it in all the shadow?
Yes.
Even at 12:30?
Yes. It was a very bright sunny day, cloudless. I was hoping we'd have a day like that during this time.
Do you remember when I had the two scenes on there and we were looking at them at the same time? I was able to tell the exact density of the sun on both days. Kind of looking at them with the same thing. Here's the form again. I mean, I never would have believed this myself, but here's the shooter. So you have two scenes here. Your eyes
That's the location of the shooter.
That's the location.
The shooter's not
right. The target right here is representing the rifle of the shooter in the Mormon picture, because I now know exactly where it is. And here's the scene of the shape in the daylight. But if this were the shooter, this is where he would be. It's my target now I'm looking at. And all this is doing is verifying that everything in the Mormon in the three photographs, do they all fit? Now they all fit.
How many feet from the intersection of the...
So we haven't pinpointed it.
Shot down the stairwell?
No. Back toward the first, the lower...
We're taking up an awful lot of time with all these questions. Let's save the questions.
Right. I have a map. It's all out.
You can talk to them later about the questions.
Okay, let's move on. I want to get to, we have another thing we want to show you here. The famous, oh, here it is, it's still on there. Here's a good reason why it didn't fit. If you look at the angle of the corner of the concrete to President Kennedy's head in the Mormon photograph, and you look at the angle between the target, which is the pie plate, from the same location, if the lines went parallel, then that means it's the same position. So see, this line is coming here, this line is going this way, so from a center line, this is going to the right, this is going to the left. These lines have to put it crudely, these lines have to be going in the same location in order for them to be at the same exact spot with relationship to all these physical things that haven't moved. And so that's where the 7'6" came from. I'm going to move this up now to another thing. This has all been verified. If you recall the so-called autopsy photograph of President Kennedy, the one that has a very small bullet hole up here in the top, we've been able to establish, and I won't take much time, but I'm going to show you one image that Bob Rhodes has said for a long time that this whole part here is gone. And this is absolutely an altered photograph. This is absolutely and totally painted in, so to speak. We're going to show you what the head shots look like, what the autopsy photo looked like before it was altered. There it is. This area you see in white in there, this is really what was left of the hair. This is what the government says is the official autopsy photograph of the back of the head. President Kennedy's laying down. Here's his neck. Here's the back of his head. This whole area here on this photograph has been retouched. Now, it shouldn't be too hard to prove this one. This is what we were told. Remember the little hole up here? His head's almost gone. See the stages that the head was in. I have a lot of words down here about the masks that they use and how many masks they use. We know exactly. There we are down to this round surface. The Jack and Jim and I were talking And we think we now have an answer for why the head still looks good, but that's something else again. Anyhow, here's the real autopsy photograph. We've been duped. There's the picture we were shown on the left. Here's what was really there when that picture was taken. Alright, one last thing I'd like to talk about, and I'd just like to make a closing statement if I may. Well, here's an overlay. This is kind of stuff Jack White does. We can do it with machines now, so we're going to replace them. Anyhow, see, we're going to overlay this. You can see the altered part. It matches up perfectly. We're going to take one fast look. Oh, here's a scene. Here's another scene where the photograph has been altered. The person whose hand belongs here was the person holding this head when this photograph was taken. So this person, whoever it is, knows that the head was in actuality in this condition when he was holding it. Whoever this is, he's not fake. Here, this is not fake. Here, but all the rest of it was gone. So if this person will come forward, he's a witness to the problem. There's the same two scenes. The top, or what we were led to believe was true. The bottom is the way it really was. Oh, there's a lot of stuff on other things on going down into the tracheotomy, and we've already been through that, but we know what we're looking at. The only other thing I'd like to talk about, and this is for David Lipton. This is a autopsy photograph that I cannot verify as President Kennedy, but I can tell you that the photograph is genuine. I took a picture of President Kennedy as he stepped off the plane in Dallas, and I'm going to superimpose it. But this is of a cadaver, and here's this picture as he steps off the plane. I rotated it. And now we're going to place it over the cadaver. And we've done a database on, we know a lot about flesh as we're working with Dr. Weck, believe me. And I want to tell you that in my opinion, this area up in here is not human. It is not human material. And so therefore it lends some credibility to the fact that whenever this picture was taken, it looks like at least the skull is, what's the right word? Skull is filled up. But when you look at it just with your eyes, there's some material on there that is non-human. And Dr. Weck observed a piece of material in one of the autopsy photos many years ago that I pointed out to him, and I asked him what it was. He said, Tom, I've never seen anything like it in any of my autopsies. Is that correct? We still don't know what it is. It's a piece of metal, and he's never seen it. Okay, so I want to get into, here's a ruler. These hands, this autopsy photograph is real. Okay, we're just going to get into Oswald very briefly. Jack White has done a tremendous job on Oswald. I can tell you in my opinion, here's the hole in the back of his coat. I can tell you in my opinion that everything Jack White has found on the famous Oswald backyard photograph is absolutely correct. I've gone a little bit farther than Jack, and we've been able to go into 3 areas on the Oswald photograph. I just want to tell you what they are. First off, Jack told me that the paper, here's some more of the bread, I ain't past this stuff. Jack told me that the newspaper that he had was 11 inches wide. And so what I have done is I processed the Oswald photograph before I ever met Jack. I came to Dallas, we met, I showed him what I found in, well, it was 3 days. Jack showed me what he found in 30 years. We came to the same conclusion. So it's not that I'm better, it's just that Jack didn't have the tool that I have, but I think I'll have one. Anyhow, we're going to look at this photograph. the same way we've looked at everything else. And we're going to find out, and you can see right here, everything you see is back in purple there, the paper, the face, the arm, the hands, part of the rifle, part of the ears, has been put on over top of another image. So we now know that this is fake, and I don't think there's any problem there. But we're going to show you some fancy image processing that's going to allow you with your eyes to see some things that we found out. For instance, we found out that if you take and forget about measurement, forget about scale, because once you put a ruler in a photograph, it cannot be used as a piece of evidence in court. So what I do is I take anything that we know, for instance, if this is 11 inches, and everything else in this scene, because as the gray level goes back and forth, everything is linear. That means if you measure something here and know what it is, you can measure everything else automatically. So in one situation, I made the rifle length the way the Warren Commission stated, and all of a sudden Oswald got too short. If I made Oswald the right length, the rifle got too long. But in the last piece of information that Jack has given me about 11 inches on the photo, I want to tell you that in both cases, the paper is too large. Which means that this is a terrible forgery, because if this didn't get small when the gun got small, proportionally, it means that it's larger than either Oswald or the rifle is in real life. This is a terrible fake. But let's go and look at the person behind the real man standing in the photograph. What does this man look like? Who is this man? I can't answer that yet. Somebody's going to find out. But let's find out, first off, we know that the hands are fake. We know that this man, this hand on here has a blemish on his back of his right hand. What's what happens as we start to go in on the fake parts of these pictures? The real face behind the Oswald face. We're going to start to strip the face away, the mask. The mask. When Oswald said that that was his face on another body, I believe him. He's absolutely right. How did he know it was a face? How did he know it wasn't a head? Wouldn't you or I say that's somebody else's head? He said, no, that's somebody else's face. This is very sophisticated fakery. It is not computer fakery. It is not computer fakery. Here's the third dimension of this photo. And I'm going to play this in real time, and you're going to see the actual mouth behind the mouth. Now, Jack and people have always said this shadow is terrible. It is terrible. They've always said that it's the different times of day by the shadow. We'll get into that in a second. But watch what happens in the area of the mouth. You're going to see a second mouth come in. You have to look pretty close. We're going to take the gray level and we're going to start to strip this away. This is looking down. Here's the paper. This newspaper was put on this fake photo last. It was put on after everything else was in it. What's the mouth? And what's the chin? You'll actually see the expression change. You're starting to look at the man who was in the picture behind the Oswald face. I've started to come to the conclusion with what I know now and some other things that I've seen. I have to say that I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald killed anybody. I think he was exactly what he said, a patsy. Now, certainly our government can take this photograph that's been used as evidence in the Warren report. Why can't they come forward and say this is fake? Because once this is fake, think of how many stories are wrong. Speak something one other thing that I've done is that, oh, there's the man that's in the photo. I don't know who he is, but if you look, there's his nose, there's his mouth, there's his ear. His ears are shorter than Oswald's ears. Jack knew a long time ago that somebody pasted an ear on his ear. Jack is a great man on ear measurement. This is the face of the man behind the photograph. If anybody knows who he is, be my guest. Now, there's another thing I want you to notice, and this is speculation on my part. This is not a blemish on the photograph. This person has a problem in his right eye. His left eye and his right eye are different. This is either, and I don't know yet, I'm going to tell you, it's either a glass eye or it is an eye that is turned outward to the right-hand side of his head. And we're looking at the white part of his eye, which is giving us a better reflection than when he's looking straight ahead. But these two eyes are not looking straight ahead. There it is. Very apparent. See his right eye? Look at how little the dot is on his left eye. Incidentally, I do eyes too. Okay, now, the only other thing I want to tell you about Oswald, and then we're going to finish, is this is the actual real time of how a computer does it. I'll just stop it for a second here. This is the computer, this is the way it moves. This is making the X dimension, the Y dimension, and the grade level depth. But I've always wondered what time this photograph was taken. And so Jack has made many measurements. I've read every book I could, and Marina Oswald Porter has said that she's taken the picture at noon. There are books that say she took it at 4 o'clock. There are books that say that everything I've been able to read has said that this photograph was made by her from noon onward. So what I did is I looked at the photograph, and looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes, I did not look at the shadows, because I can tell you, you can find any time of the day you want from sun up to sundown, depending on which shadow you pick. But there's one piece of information in here that is not changed. Remember now, the face is Oswald's, the body is somebody else. But this body also has feet, and this body has a head. And this body has shoes that have a military spit shine on it. And I still do it from my days in the Navy. It's very unsanitary. But you get a very high glossy shine. And so what I've done is I've taken the shoes, we'll see it here in a second. Oh, there's the blemish on the right hand. Whoever's hand this belongs to, it has a sort of a aging mark or a mole or something on the back of the right hand. There it is there. And so what I've done is you're going to see his eyes come out of it. This is the same two photographs, and watch the eyes come on. This is a digitized image, but wait till we get down and past the black. Look. Can you see his right eye? You can't see his left eye. This is another verification that what I'm telling you is for real.
He's a Terminator.
Now, the sun. We're almost to the end, folks. Here's the feet of the man in the picture. I'm able to I know what the sun is, I'm able to look at the apex of the sun. The brightest image on there means that where this thing comes to a peak. Where this comes to a peak, for instance, this is the sun's direction coming up this way. Here's the reflection of the sun, here's the reflection here, here, and here. And I'm going to find the center of the brightest level. And there they are. This still isn't enough information. And now what I got to do is go in and get rid of all the reflections, like we did the little boy that died. And we're going to find out exactly where the sun is. We don't care about any shadows. And we're going to go in and measure the sun. We're going to take all these angles and triangulate them. There is, well, you can see exactly the sun. Everything else is gone. And we're going to go in and find the center of it. And we're going to measure it. We're going to triangulate it. Now what I had to do is I had to get down to the Science Center in Pittsburgh, and they were kind enough to give me a trajectory of the sun from March the 31st, 1963, from sunrise to sunset. And I want to tell you that if, and this is a very big if this picture was taken on March the 31st, 1963, it was taken at 9:12 a.m. in the morning. There is no testimony that I've ever seen, and maybe somebody else knows. It's always been from noon on, 9:12 a.m. in the morning. Now also what you could do, and I don't want to do it because you could take this information and start going back to the rest of the year and find out what day it really was taken, because if it was taken in the Dallas area. But the point is if you move this information, and the government can certainly verify that, back and forth a week or two, it makes no difference. I mean, the sun doesn't change that much. 9:12 a.m., I think that's very significant. And now we've come to the end of it. And I'd just like to make a closing remark if I may. Turn it. It is great. I'm going to read something here. I'm going to make some statements that I hope are put in the media. I make these statements from the bottom of my heart. I make them because I believe I'm right. And I'd like to make a plea for several things in the public. If they don't get in the media, at least you folks will know what I said. Number one, I would like very much if Mr. Gordon Arnold would come forward and make a statement of what he saw that day, because I can prove Mr. Gordon Arnold was there, and that what he said he did. And I realize the way he feels about his safety probably. I feel the same way. But you see, now it doesn't matter whether Tom Wilson's here or not. We have 100 people that can go forward here. So I would ask, I've never met Mr. Arnold. If he wants to come forward, any one of these gentlemen would help him, I'll help him. But if he would just come and make a statement, we have a living witness as to what you saw on the screen tonight, whether I'm for real or not. The second thing I'd like to make is a statement that perhaps Marina Oswald Porter would like to maybe make a new statement on taking the photograph in the backyard. There's one other piece of information we have. Jack White and I have confirmed that the person taking this photo would have to be much taller than Marina Oswald. But the important part is that, as I understand it, she said she looked down and the camera had a viewfinder and she didn't know she used it, so she put it up to her eye and took the picture, which allows for the increase in height. But to the best of my ability, the Imperial Reflex camera has no feed sight. How can you take a picture if you can't even see what you're taking? And these pictures never deviate by a quarter of an inch of the angle. How can anybody hold a picture of a camera on a crooked camera? I just wish that Marina Oswald, she's been in this country for quite a while, perhaps she might like to make another statement, or perhaps she might like to see why I'm asking her to make this statement. The other thing I'd like her to do, if she has any control over it, I would like her to maybe make the exhumation tape of Oswald available to Dr. Weck and I, so that we can put this through image processing and the best forensic guy in the world can take a look at it, and we'll tell her whether that's the same person or not. I'd like to see that tape if it's available. The next thing I'd like to ask the public is that when I first found this out, I tried to do it in the media. I went to all the big names. I went to one other researcher, and I was turned away, and I understand why that happened. But all the big names said, this is old news, or we don't want to talk to you. The only person that returned a letter that I wrote, and this is all documented, was Mr. David Bellin. Now, Mr. David Bellin was an attorney on the Warren Commission. He sent a letter back saying, I don't think you're right, Mr. Wilson, but since you've put so much time on this, I would like to be able to meet with you and see your findings. Well, I never asked him to come to Pittsburgh, and he never asked me to come to Des Moines. But on the program that I photographed, that I started off with, he said on there, this is a loaded ballgame, and if I had 2 hours, I'd be able to explain my case with a single bullet theory. I'm offering Mr. David Bellin the opportunity to sit with myself and Dr. Weck in an open forum. Nothing is going to be closed doors from now on. In an open forum, and I'll be very glad to show him what I have, and perhaps I can change Mr. David Bellin's mind. Maybe I can't, but at least you look at it, and I respect the man for it. The next thing is I'm from Pennsylvania, and I'm going to ask my senator, Mr. Arlen Specter, I'm going to Thomas affair, and I assure you he'll be the first one to initiate an investigation.
Senator West.
The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to suggest to the government that I'm willing to expose every piece of my technology. I have thousands and thousands of hours of how I did this. All the secrets are written down. I'm willing to let the government look at this and tear it apart. But there's only one way that I'll do it. Number one, they can use any company they want as long as they are not a military contractor or a university affiliated with a military contract. If they want to provide somebody else, I'll be glad to do that, and I'll be glad to give them names of companies that are reputable in image processing, and I'm sure they will be able to verify it. If they cannot do that, and the last thing I'd like to suggest to the government is that they give Dr. Weck and myself secret clearance. Let us go in and look at all this secret paraphernalia, and we will represent the American public in looking at this process. And the last thing I want to do is read you here is this. It's ironic, but about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was in Dallas, my wife and I made a trip down to the LBJ farm. I wanted to see where this man came from, why a man would live in a place like this that was so beautiful. And I walked down to the grave site, and I looked, and there was a guard or whatever you call those people that was park protection. And I said to the park protection man, I said, gee whiz, I said, why would a man had all this, why would he want to be president of the United States? And he looked down at me and he said, power, son, power. And I shook my head, and there was a little lady sitting on the swing on the back porch, and she had a park uniform on. And I walked over, and at this particular time, I was just trying to get image processing in the industry, and I was so frustrated because when you go out in areas of industry where the textbook hasn't been written yet, you're ridiculed. Dr. Weck has been ridiculed for years because he's the only one that said it's a bunch of baloney. I now know how he feels. Anyhow, this little lady in this park ranger's outfit said, what do you do, son? And I said, well, I'm an engineer. She said, oh, that sounds exciting. And I started telling her, she said, well, you know, you sound like you're the prince. I said, yeah. I said, there are days, you know, I said, I guess I'm considered an oddball because what I do is not the acceptable method. And this little lady told me something, and I wrote it down on a piece of scratch paper. She wrote it up? I can do that. I wrote it down on this piece of scratch paper, and I went back home and I had 1,000 cards printed, and anytime anybody said you can't do this, I threw it at them. And I'd just like to read it what this lady said. She said, there are 1,000 who will tell you that it cannot be done, 1,000 to prophesy failure, 1,000 to point out to you, one by one, the danger that awaits to assail you. But buckle in with a bit of a grin, take off your coat and go to it. Tackle the thing that cannot be done, and you'll do it. And I found out that it was Amos Jansen Koff's LBJ's cousin. So here's LBJ coming back with a woman to give me something that I kept on my desk and kept me going. So I thank you, and all I can say is I appreciate the opportunity to present this. I know some of it's very hard to understand, but these gentlemen made it for real. Thank you.
Vividly remember this. 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy Motorcade Day in downtown Dallas. Kennedy and Governor John Conley of Texas were cut down by an assassin's bullet. And now, in one particular portion of Dallas, it's November 22nd, 1963, all over again. Frank Welch reports on the making of a movie.
Some observers here say Oliver Stone has apparently spared no expense to precisely recreate the way Dealey Plaza looked in November 1963. And so far, assassination buffs like Russell Lease say Stone's authenticity is intriguing, Police has been studying the Kennedy motorcade replicas, including that big Lincoln limousine.
We have found very little in the way of flaws. Pretty much everything. We brought our research materials. That's what we were doing earlier, is kind of checking the vehicles out with pictures and things like that. And I don't think we found anything wrong yet. It looks real good. We're impressed. In fact, we're really impressed with what they done with Dealey Plaza.
But not everyone is excited about the assassination flick. Old-time Dallas native David Howell says Hollywood is opening old scars in the Big D.
Too much to do about it. Over the years, I think they ought to put it to rest.
A little better angle of some of the vintage cars they brought in to put behind the knoll. This is the pavilion. Looking down. There we go. All right, this is the fence of the grassy knoll. Grassy knoll assassin would have seen right out over the fence. There's limo. Standing down, we're looking into the sun. Secret Service car. Possible. The inside of the presidential limousine. So here you see the jump seats, presidential seal, and the back seat. Secret Service car. You'll see all the guys here playing Secret Service agents. It's the presidential limousine. And this white car down in front is Chief Curry's car. Playing Chief Curry's car. Who's the Dallas Police Chief. Who's in the lead. Presidential limousine.
He's in that first.
From the other.
Folks, I need to have you come back up this way, sir.
Okay.
Can I get a picture down this way?
Be cool. I'm coming. This is from a side window in the depository. Swing out looking down. The building you see right here is completely phony, made of foam bricks and scaffolding holding it up. The depository employees watched them build this strictly for the film, and they're going to tear it right back down as soon as they're finished. Looking out over here, this is the paved parking lot, actually.
Yeah, you got it together.
Which they imported dirt and railroad ties and vintage cars. And then, of course, the signal tower.
John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
And will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
That the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
This is a friendly crowd in downtown Dallas, and the first red lights are now visible coming far down the street, just having now turned right hand onto Main off of Harwood.
I was on Simmons Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting their chance to see the president as he made his way towards the Trade Mart.
Here we go.